Hey, ho there. How are you? Thank you so much for tuning in. This is episode 10 of the Kids Health series with Lawrence August. How are you doing, Lawrence? Good to see you.
I'm good. I'm excited. We've got
Happy 10 to you. High five.
we're gonna do it. We practice this at
Boom.
set. Virtual high five. It works.
We are so stoked to come at you today. We are just want to do a gentle reminder, though. You can catch up with all the past episodes on our Rumble playlist. I'll attach that below. You can also check it out on the Kids Get Healthy YouTube channel. He has a playlist on there. And on my YouTube channel, Heidi Pop from Los Angeles. So try catching up. There's some juicy nuggets in there, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on that. But for today, we are going to get hardcore and down and dirty about hunger always wins. Lawrence, what does that mean? What does that even mean?
Hunger always wins. That's exactly it. This is this sort of like obvious thing that's staring us all in the face, but we're not always thinking of it as deep as we can. We're not as aware of this as we should be, or that I hate saying should, is that we might want to be, right?
Okay.
I'm trying to avoid should, the finger waggy. We should, but
Shoulda, coulda,
we
woulda.
might want to consider. I would invite you all to entertain this idea of hunger always winning. It is one of the primary needs, right? Without food, what happens? Right? Without food, I mean, we can only go so long without food, and then water, of course. It's a primal urge. And
You're right.
Human beings, we eat when we are hungry, and we eat until we're full. And to kind of put the focus, let's say, on weight gain, right? I mean, what is weight gain by definition is, we've been eating past a certain threshold where our body is now storing in excess, right? We're in a surplus, right? Mm-hmm. So what does that actually tell us about the behaviors that got us there? I was thinking about this, Heidi, last year, it was 30 years since we've graduated, high school.
So crazy.
And, common scenario, you'll go to a 30-year reunion, let's say. And if you maybe are catching up with an old classmate who gained, let's say, 60 pounds, right? 60 pounds in 30 years, what is that per year?
A lot.
2 pounds. It's 2 pounds per year.
Yeah.
So it really can be a slow creep where what you're actually seeing in a person that, and again, everybody's scenario is different. Sometimes people, you don't know where you're catching people in life, right? Maybe they're 60 pounds heavier than when you last saw them, but they've dropped 50 and they're on their way back to, their fighting weight. But the point of this is to say that often what happens, it's this slow creep over time, and it's simply a matter of a meal to meal to meal micro overfeeding situation where you're eating until you're satisfied. You're eating when you're hungry. You're eating till you're satisfied. 2 pounds in an entire year, 1 pound in 6 months, keep breaking that down. 1/6 of a pound in a month. So, I think framing it that way so that we can look at this with some sense of perspective and also compassion, and realize that, this idea of it's just sort of gluttony. What we're actually dealing with is a food supply, a food environment that lends itself to that overcompensation, that eating until we're full, but not getting full as quickly, right? Mm-hmm. And then food that does not, promote satiety. Also the other aspects of, not being aware of our meal timing and really not being mindful of like, okay, what our body really needs. So there's a lot of things to unpack today about hunger, but that's essentially it, is that hunger is going to win.
Gotcha.
So if you can understand hunger on both a fundamental level, right, a basic general level, and a personal level, like what does it mean for you? What are you like? What's making you hungry? So I'm just really excited about talking about this today, because I think we could really kind of uncover some things that maybe for the listener, they haven't really thought of it that way. And if you can, you guys, if you can get this hunger thing down, I'm telling you, it's principle number one. One principle that's like 90% of the battle here. Yep.
This is kind of what, I mean, we jumped right in. There goes I'm going to do a longer intro, Lawrence. And then we're like, boom. But I was excited because it's true. This principle, you take this on with all these previous episodes and this information you have, you're giving people pretty much a free little arsenal of how to get control of their bodies. So
I want to. Yeah.
Thank you, Lawrence. Yes.
And
yes.
smash that subscribe and like button, guys. Comment below, we love to hear your comments, and we love to get a conversation going. That's what this is about. And I have like just zero issue with sharing some of the best stuff, because I feel like that's sort of the obligation here. And I know that enough people have their own individual situation that if they need that individualized help, I've got plenty of, opportunities for clients. And so I think that we're in that age of, reciprocal. It's giving, and giving and giving. And people just kind of find it finds its way back. So
it does. It's service to others right now. I think that it would be so lovely, yes, to have you all hit that like and subscribe button.
Yes,
okay, I think we're milking that one.
We are giving you guys here. This is gold. All right. So I'm gonna let's start with just like a little screen share.
Okie doke.
So let's let's just maybe
should we start with
little Mercury retrograde.
We're having a moment.
We're having some fun this morning getting on here, but we should have Heidi.
There we go. I see it. It's coming.
So let's talk about this, like reasons for hunger, right? And this is just a laundry list where I could like go too crazy into this, but just want to sort of point out some top reasons, for hunger. I mean, number one is just inadequate calorie intake. I mean, this is one of the just a situation where someone is literally they don't have access to food, they're not eating enough. They're just not eating enough. Of course, that's like a very basic reason for hunger. We know that. Mm-hmm. Sadly, there are a lot of people that hunger is their default. They live in hunger. It's it is interesting. We're at the first period in our history where there are more people suffering from obesity or with obesity than are hungry. So we're beginning to solve world hunger, thankfully. But it is an interesting situation that we've gotten to. We've gone from, when we were kids, it was children are starving, and they still are. And we have to address that.
I was just going to say,
And even in this country,
societal, it's unbalanced.
Yeah. So there's that, right? Skipping meals. People are getting caught up in schedules where they're just skipping. They're busy, or they're engrossed in other activity. They're not like putting themselves first in terms of prioritizing meals. And I'm going to go through these fast. We will go deep on this overall issue, but just kind of tick these boxes, right?
Yeah.
Low blood sugar. And there's a lot of reasons that blood sugar get low. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Dehydration, it can make people feel hungry, right? So maybe we just need to check in on our hydration level. Sometimes that's all it is. The body's saying, I need something. If I got to get that moisture from food, then that's what I'm going to do, right?
Yeah.
Lack of sleep is a big one these days.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I have so many stories for these. Okay.
Yeah, each one, right? That's what I said. When you talk about hunger, like, oh, hunger, okay. Well, look at all that can go into it. And this is a short list. I put a list together of about 20 things. We could keep going. But lack of sleep is a big one these days, right? So you see all these things when I'm hearing that somebody or gleaning from, working with a client of like that there's a hunger issue, that there's some kind of hunger issue, we're looking at all of these things, right? So whether it's in a child or an adult, because I'm working with the parents too, right?
Yeah.
On their own eating and their own stress management. Medications, right? We want to find out. Medications can certainly influence, increase appetite. Pregnancy, that's another real reason. Hormones, hormonal imbalances, certain medical conditions need to be honored, right? Things like diabetes, GERD, acid reflux, those can cause increased hunger. Boredom is a big one,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Look,
Does that go
and
along with
this,
the munchies?
yes,
Boredom?
exactly.
Okay.
And we sort of are, we're kind of living through the charcuterie board era of, Zoom calls, virtual life, pandemic era living that brought in, just a lot of idle time,
Yeah.
where, we saw this, kind of increased phenomenon of
Mhm.
snacking.
Mhm.
I think I might have mentioned this before on one of our shows, but bears repeating that, there were, during the first year of this C-19 situation, there were 42% of Americans reported unwanted weight gain. Okay.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
And the average weight gain, do you know how much that was in the first year of people who gained unwanted weight?
6 pounds.
It was 29 pounds.
Oh! Holy smokes.
Yeah. And
That makes sense. I had atrophy. That was the worst part. My
right,
muscle atrophy
so
was
it
so
just
bad.
created,
Wow.
you can see where that goes, right?
Yeah.
That leads to this kind of like, there was also the, the stress and also, all these other things, kind of like boredom, stress, food availability, changes in habits, changes in activity level, right? A perfect storm,
Yeah.
right? Because that goes into the next one, is, emotional eating, right? So
Mhm.
people sort of eating their emotions, they say.
Mhm.
This expression, it's not, for some people, it's not what they're eating, it's what's eating them.
Yeah. Or it's that hit, that serotonin hit or dopamine hit or,
Yeah,
the
correct. All of the
Mhm.
above, actually. Both
Mhm.
both dopamine in the drive toward, the activity of eating and the sensation you get, and the serotonin from the actual food you're choosing. So we
Mhm.
know carbs. Carbs are wonderful for, and we can leverage that, right? Carbs give us a nice bump of serotonin.
Mhm.
So when you understand food the way I teach, you can use these qualities of the food in your favor.
Mhm.
And in fact, there was research in the 90s from MIT where it spawned a whole book written called the Serotonin Power Diet. Right? I know all these books have some kind of diet word on it, but it's a way of eating where you're actually using that kind of carb coma quality to your favor by consuming carbs more at night, to actually bump that serotonin. And that can actually be the fix if you're getting certain types of,
Hmm.
uh, starchy, fibrous carbohydrate, where you're actually going to cut off the chances of having late night cravings and increase your chance of getting higher quality sleep. So it's all in the nuance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Timing and type and reasons behind, etc. Um, social eating, right? So
Mhm.
this we found can lead to increased hunger. And so I've said this before, I keep saying it. The more people that are at a table, the more each person at the table tends to eat,
Oh, really?
right? Right.
I
So if
can
you're
see
just
that.
going to a restaurant and you're by yourself and you're going to sit down and order a meal, chances are you're going to eat a sort of, single portion, right? 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, a whole group, a party, right? What tends to happen, foods come in appetizers, people want to share drinks. We want to kind of keep the party going. There's desserts, right? Each person at that table is going to eat more than they would if they were left alone,
Makes
right?
sense. Mhm.
And it's a lot of it is, there's just kind of a there's a momentum to it, right? We are aiming creatures again, so we tend to eat with our eyes.
Mhm.
So also, again, when we're in restaurants, if we can ask for a to-go package at the start and bundle that up, and out of sight, out of mind, we'll have a better chance of eating a proper portion, right?
It's all
Than
about
saying, oh, I'm
portion.
going to eat until I am full, and then I'm going to ask for the to-go bag. Like, say, that's a different experience.
Mhm.
For those of us who've been taught to clean our plate, we're going to sort of aim toward that. That's the problem we're trying to solve. Is there's a plate that has food, and I need to solve that problem because I was told from the time I was a kid, finish
Yeah.
my plate, and I'm programmed to do that. So there's
Yeah.
all of these things that go into it too. Um, and then there's this disordered eating, which is a whole other category, right?
Yeah.
Binge eating disorders. And so now if we're binging and purging and things, it can get very scary. Sometimes excessive exercise, right? Excessive exercise, I'd say, without proper mindfulness of the food and sort of eating appropriately for your activity and exercise, that can also kind of lead to people having kind of dysregulated hunger patterns.
And it can go hand in hand with the eating disorder. They
all
just
of
like,
this, right?
Yeah, they all go hand in hand with each other. Yeah.
As age, this one here I want to touch on real fast. And I'm bringing this up. I know it's a kind of kids-based show, but we've got to kind of speak to the parents out there.
Yeah.
It's convenient and it makes sense to blame our metabolism slowing down, as we get older.
I'm glad you're saying this.
However, it's simply untrue. There is an age. Okay, there is an age, but Heidi, I'm going to take a swing at what age metabolism slows down. Give me kind of like maybe your answer and then what you think a lot of people think. They may or may not be the same thing, but what's
52?
How old?
50, like 52.
Not bad. It's 60.
Okay.
And it's actually a very minor slowdown.
Yeah. It's so funny. I have mom friends in their 40s and like, that metabolism's slowing down. I'm like, is it though? Or is it the wine?
Correct. And there are other factors that we might be thinking it's age, right? But age per se, when you remove out and control for other variables, right? Because the honest truth is, if somebody's dealing with like PCOS, let's say, right?
What's that?
Polycystic ovary syndrome. Like, so where like there's excess androgens, there. I actually was reading a paper. Females deal with this where, their basal metabolic rate is significantly different, right? And it doesn't have to do with age. In fact, in the study, it was a study from Greece, and the mean age was like 24. Oh. And to give you an idea of how different it was, the basal metabolic rate of a woman at that age is around 1,800 calories average. With women with PCOS, is like 1,100 and something. Oh, wow. So that's a big difference. And so they're having a much harder time losing weight. Their food requirements are different. So that's a whole thing, right? That's a whole other thing. Genetics, this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious what you're going to say here.
Yeah, schmah, right? It's like, so genetics,
like
there's this thing of, now let's just touch on this real quick, right? To kind of a framework. We know these GLP-1 drugs, right, are taken off. And we talked on our show about the new recommendations from the, pediatric.
I think it's episode 1 or 2, I think. Oh, we lost your sound, Lawrence. It just went mute real quick. I think you just hit mute real quick. I think I can unmute you.
Sorry about that. What was the last?
There you go.
Sorry about that.
Pediatrics. We heard from pediatric.
We've got these new recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics that they're recommending these GLP-1 agonist drugs. Now, here's the thing. Those drugs do not do anything magical. You know what they do? They control hunger.
Oh.
Okay? They don't rearrange a person's genetics. Right? They don't speed up metabolic rate. They literally just control hunger. So people eat less. That's what they do.
Okay.
So
can I pause you 1 sec?
Sure.
I think you're using your computer mic now, I think. I don't know if you have a separate one. Yeah. But the audio just shifted.
Retrograde.
I was like, it's been
hunger and Mercury retrograde. Those are the two things. Those are the two things. You're not going to get us today, Satan. Or are we back?
Oh, there you go. Yep.
This is epic.
Okay.
You guys smash that like and subscribe button if you're joining us in the wage against Mercury retrograde. So genetics, right? So they kind of talk outside both sides of their mouth, because the same people that are public facing that are saying, these drugs are wonderful and we can get into conversation about that or whatever. But also that there's this huge genetic problem. Well, I mean, those drugs don't solve for that problem. So you're telling me this drug is working miraculously, but it solves for the problem of hunger.
Right.
It doesn't solve for the problem of genetics. And my favorite kind of framework for looking at genetics is, it's kind of like, genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle will pull the trigger.
That's a good one.
Do we see propensity in genetics there is a propensity. But again, I'd invite people to think about the 1950s and 1960s. Take a look at our obesity rates. They were virtually, absent. 5%, 10%. Now we're at 42+% in adult obesity. We're at 1 in 5 with childhood obesity. Go back to 1974, it was 1 in 20.
Wow.
Did we genetically change, in a generation? There is this idea of epigenetics, right? Where the environment, there are, the chemical arguments and different things that are sort of triggering certain genetic adaptations and whatnot. But again, hunger. Let's also focus on what we can control, because we know our genetics is, where's our genetics? Smoking. For some people, if they're smokers, they quit. We know that can.
I'm surprised there's still people who do smoke, to be honest.
All right, it's kind of wild, right?
Yeah. Boy.
It's kind of wild. Alcohol can do this, and again, these different environmental cues. It's the sight, the smells of food can trigger hunger. So let's look at. This is actually a study that I'd love to point out. There's this idea, it's called the protein leverage hypothesis. I love to talk about it, right?
Yeah, you are a protein guy, aren't you?
Well, why I am a protein guy is quite simply, again, if we go back to the fundamentals, there's protein, there's fats, there's carbs, right? Of those macronutrients, there are 2 that are absolutely essential, and there is 1 macronutrient that simply isn't essential.
Okay.
So the 2 that are critical are protein and fats.
That's what I thought.
In the form of amino acids in protein, right? And essential fatty acids and fats. Carbohydrates are simply not required by the human body. That does not mean before people freak out, that does not mean I'm saying eat a 0 carb diet, but just looking from a primary physiological need. Right. So if we can think through this with some common sense and say, what is our body actually requiring? Right. Protein, amino acids, fats, fatty acids, glucose. Yes, we do need glucose, because right now somebody's thinking, well, no. Your brain needs glucose. You need glucose. Yes, but you can make glucose. Our body can produce glucose through an action called gluconeogenesis. We're glucose making machines. And we only need a teaspoon of glucose in our bloodstream at any given time. And so this is one of many studies that support what is called the protein leverage hypothesis, which is essentially that human beings will eat until their protein requirements are met. What they did in this particular study, they looked at U.S. dietary intake over a five-year period here to determine what the macronutrient intake was, right, as a percentage of total intake. And then they looked at data from 13 other countries because we also wanted to look at places where there was a variety of different kinds of foods, right? And what they found was protein intake of the U.S. population in multiple international populations, regardless of demographic, regardless of lifestyle factors, it was consistently around 16% of total energy, right? So this suggests a biological control mechanism that tightly regulates protein intake, right? And consequently, intake of the other macronutrients. So why is that powerful? We are going to take a look here at some slides here. So if we look at birth of epidemic. So we're going to look at now here from the 70s and then kind of on into current day. This goes up to 2000, but you can imagine where it's at now.
Yeah.
Now what we see is this green line on the bottom is protein intake has remained relatively flat. It's a little slight bump, but tiny. When we see these other macronutrients increase, we see carbohydrate and fat. And this is essentially your cheap added sugars, your flours, your cheap oils. So we're seeing is a protein dilution, right? Meaning there is less and less percentage of protein in the available food. So to quickly understand this, if I have 50 people in one room, 50 people in another room, in the first room, there is a mix of food available. There's some whole foods, but there's also some processed food, right? In the second room, there is no processed food. We're not seeing any of this protein dilution. It's all whole foods. It's all whole, to use the term, real food. And you're doing basically an ad libitum study, right? Meaning eat as you want, which is really the way it works, right? Because we can do a study where we control intake for people. We can kind of force them, you're going to eat this much, and we're going to watch the outcomes. But that doesn't really jibe well with the real world. Because in the real world, we eat freely, right? We tend to not eat with constraints. And this is why people it's a bummer being on a diet, because it feels like restricted and there's constraints. And why am I doing, like, what, I have to only eat 500 calories. Like, how does that work? What we will find is that in these two rooms, the room with the processed food, this group of people will almost always eat far more calories, significantly more calories, in upwards of 300 to 500 calories more per day than the group not exposed to that sort of food. When you look at the protein intake of both groups, they're almost identical.
Oh.
Do you see?
Yeah.
So it's kind of this idea that they're simply eating until they can get that protein requirement, but one grouping of food is not as conducive to hitting that requirement as fast. So we're in a situation where we're still, what's the word? Hungry. Hunger is going to win, and it's going to say, no, keep going. I need those amino acids. And really, it's proper to say amino acids, because we can get amino acids from a variety of sources. This isn't an animal plant debate right now. What it is we have to find those amino acids. So when we look at this is very interesting, because this really does, this really does kind of map along, again, correlation, not causation. But here's our obesity chart.
Yeah.
Right there. You sort of see in the 70s, you see what is happening here.
Yeah.
Did people suddenly did we become gluttonous? Is it really that? I think we need to look at it from a different point of view and say, what's going on in the food supply?
Well, that's when fast food took off. That's to-goes. That's the working parents, the latchkey kid, convenience, microwaves.
Heidi, keep going.
Microwaves.
I mean, sing it, right? It's all of these things. It's all of these things. It's a complicated issue.
And like you said, this chart only goes to 2000. Imagine after that with all the new chemicals introduced.
Sure. And to just kind of reinforce the idea of the bloodstream and glucose, just real quickly.
Yeah.
Muscles hold anywhere, 300 grams, larger people, big people, maybe up to 400 or 500 grams of sugar stored in the muscles. To kind of burn through that, you really need to be engaged in high intensity exercise. The liver stores.
I was just going to say, okay. Yeah. Why is the liver on there?
The liver stores glucose.
Okay.
So when I said it is like, if you go without, dietary intake of glucose, like you have glucose on hand. And it will take 24 hours to run through the liver glucose. So if you're like really, high intensity exercise, for some people, depending on their activity, maybe 100 grams of net carbs per day could be useful for those people. Again, I wouldn't want to make any recommendation on an individual level, because that's going to vary. But just as a way of thinking through this issue, right? So knowing that, what we have to do is we've got to set ourselves up for success, right?
Right.
We'll stop this share real quick. We'll have a couple more. We'll have a couple more screen shares.
All right.
But let's get my pretty face back on screen. I kid.
No.
What we now sort of can take a look at is, well, we know that. I think that really helps us kind of look at ourselves and the people that we've kind of projected these kind of like moral failings on and say, well, they're actually eating exactly the way that you would think they would, given a lot of circumstances. Because for one, how many people even know to maybe prioritize protein in their diet? So first, before we even start to get into any kind of crazy behavior change, one great thing is, let's just lay out a quick plan. Let's find out where your protein requirements are, right? And there's kind of the protein requirements that you'll read about on, if you Google search, which are basically bare minimums. What I deal with is optimums, right? Optimal amounts.
What is that based on, like weight and activity and?
Correct. Well, essentially really based on weight. And protein is one of those macronutrients that I would say, aside from a percentage, I would encourage people to think of it as an absolute number based on weight, because it is protein is that nutrient that is the builder, that's the building block, right? We kind of know of it from muscle, but those individual amino acids have essential functions in the body to do all sorts of things. So I will usually recommend 0.6 grams per pound of body weight, right? Up to 0.6 grams per pound. So an easy way to calculate that, if somebody's 150 pounds, a fast way to calculate that is I double the first two numbers. That gives me 30. I multiply that by 3. That gives me 90. That's 0.6 for them. So
wow.
Yeah, this is a quick,
fast.
doing this long enough, you go, oh, okay, wait, it works out. That's a quick way I can calculate it, right?
I got to teach that.
And when I say up to the 1 gram is beyond that, we don't necessarily see added benefits, right? Gotcha. That does not mean safety. That's not a safety threshold. That is just, are we seeing an added benefit?
Okay.
I'm just under 200 pounds and I'm getting right around 200 grams of protein day in and day out in my diet. And so not only do we have to think of that kind of overall requirement, we can think of a per meal requirement. And then also, what are we trying to look at? We're trying to think of food order. And we know if we're doing, that proteins and fibers and vegetables first,
yes,
we can hit satiety quicker.
Yeah. I love how you say satiety. It's satiety, right? Or says
yeah,
am
well,
I
there's
saying it wrong?
There's satiation and satiety. They're satiated and satiety. They actually are slightly different. There's kind of at the meal, eat to satiety, and satiation is how long it holds you over time.
Oh, okay.
But they have the same root. So fats, because fats are very dense and they have a lot of calories as far as the volume they take up. They're good because they kind of hold you over the long term. But the number one macronutrient for at the meal would be your protein. Again, you have these nutrients sensors in the body. There's different ways that the body is picking up. I'm getting what I need, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got my water. Good. I'm not thirsty. Good. I got my amino acids. Good. There's stretch receptors. Okay, I'm full. I'm feeling full. People will eat, roughly 2 to 3 pounds of food a day, right? And then, we go to the bathroom and get rid of a lot of that. But there is a certain amount of food that we're kind of typically used to. If we can kind of prioritize at the start, where we will have better glucose control, which sets us up for the rest of the day. So if you have the same meal, if you had some eggs and toast or eggs and pancakes, right? I would strongly encourage, consume the eggs first. It doesn't have to be all of them, but get those in first.
Yeah.
And then move next to the carbohydrate. What you'll see if you ate it the other way, if we kind of had the OJ first, waffles, pancakes first, then we go to our eggs. Woo boy.
Yeah.
Now our postprandial glucose spike, right after the meal, blood sugar bump, will now you're on the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I want to let you know, though, since our last talk, sorry to interrupt, I'm working on the giant, but my little man, he's a carb man, and he's a generator in human design. He's
yeah,
kung fu. He's active. He's moving, but he loves his croissants. And,
yeah,
and
you're
he loves,
great.
but I'm like, spoonful of peanut butter first, or your little yogurt first, or your almond milk, and then enjoy your croissant. And he's got his routine now. He pulls
I
his
love
croissant and
hearing
rates
that.
it, and then he finishes his peanut butter and eats his croissant.
I
I'm like,
love that. I love it
"We're
because this is about having technique, having tools.
Yeah, I'm going to
How,
sustain his energy
how
because he
many
can
people
see he crashes.
are hearing about this? We're
Mhm.
saying, oh, like, well, here's what to eat, but here's actually how to eat it
And the science behind it.
and
I
the
like
science
that.
behind it. We know that
Mhm.
is just a very useful strategy, right?
Yeah, yeah, cool.
And this goes into let's get the screen share back.
Yeah.
Uh, it's kind of just to make sure to cover some of the important things. So this is called a hunger satiety scale. It's your favorite word, right?
I
Now
learn something every time.
there are versions of this. I kind of pulled this one up because it's just a very nice visual
Mhm.
for parents. You guys can take a screenshot of this. Very useful for a little bit older children to work through, or the parents. For younger kids, we talk about comfortable eating,
Mhm.
so we
Good
teach
words.
them that. Um, but this is a very detailed way, 1 to 10 kind of scale, where we can see where we want to stay kind of in this middle part, right? Where we don't want to sort of get down. We want to aim to start eating when we get into this 3 to 4.
Mhm.
If we don't
Okay.
want to kind of let ourselves get too hangry, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then at the meal, we want to kind of get into 6 and 7, right? We want to
Mhm.
kind of stay in this blue zone.
Mhm.
And what goes into that, right? So we know that the brain needs about 20 minutes to register that fullness. So I think it's criminal what I see sometimes in schools where the kids are
Oh my.
standing in a long line trying to get their
Yes.
food. They end up with essentially 10 or 15 minutes to consume the food. And we're literally teaching these children to rush their meal,
I hate
and they're
that.
working against their bodies.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Not cool.
what are we doing here? Hunger always wins.
Mhm.
Um, so what will happen is at the meal that they're eating, and they tend to not know when they're full, and where they might have, if they had a little longer of time, they might have stopped sooner. They're moving more food quite simply into their food. It's the Thanksgiving effect, right? When you're just so hungry and you eat so fast that you can take in 2 plates of food, but and then the next thing you know, it kicks in, and you're laying on the sofa, adjusting your belt buckle while the football
Trying to
game's
burp.
on and falling asleep. And I'm not talking
Mhm.
about anybody specific.
I-
No, no, no. I was gonna say that's pretty much me when I go
yeah.
back home to Chicago, and uh, ready for Thanksgiving, right? But we don't want to
Mhm.
have Thanksgiving effect day in and day out in our lives. So
Mm-mm.
this scale is very a nice practical tool that I like to use to kind
Nice.
of work through this, have this
Yeah.
conversation, right?
Mhm.
We'll go to
Oh yeah.
my acronym here, right? So this kind of brings us into this whole idea. So the hunger satiety scale, the kind of being aware of those cues. This goes into this idea that we hear a lot about mindful eating, right?
Mhm.
So the little acronym I came up with called Nourish, right? Because that's the primary function. We want to nourish the body. And here are sort of the steps, the way that we work through that. We want to notice the hunger. So we can teach children to do this, right? Are you hungry? Are you really hungry? Are you bored? What,
Mhm.
asking questions, right? When they are at the table eating their food, uh, they're full. Are you full? That's it. Okay, good, right? Like you don't, we don't want you
And
to eat till your tummy hurts, right?
I like what you said too at the table,
Yeah,
because
good,
choosing having your meal
right,
unplugged,
right.
I think, is part of it too. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. Observe. So getting into, okay, like, well, how am I stress eating right now, right? Am I angry? What's going on? And that's also just a good thing, is remembering the approach at a meal should be you're in that parasympathetic relaxed state. So to not kind of eat when you're feeling frustrated. So as if this is an issue for certain people, we work on breath work, right? We
Mm.
work on nasal breathing. This all starts to come together. Doing
Mm-hmm.
that nasal breathing starts to engage parasympathetic nervous system. Now we're relaxed. We're ready to digest food properly, right? Less stress, rest, digest. Now we're actually able to approach our meal with a little more clarity. Sometimes I'll do what's called 15-15. I'll say, if you're feeling hungry and you're kind of like, in this kind of spun out state or whatever, or just as a way to kind of implement a little buffer, do 15 ounces of water and wait 15 minutes. That gives us a couple things. It gives us the hydration aspect, so we can kind of rule that out, and it gives us time. So at 15 minutes go by, recheck. Are you still hungry? If the answer is yeah, can just go eat. But sometimes it's like, oh, you know what? It kind of passed. I did that little pattern interrupt and allowed that moment to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are sort of like, we're called like bridges. There's like caloric and non-caloric. We need, a lot of times humans, we need a little bridge to the next moment. Every 20 minutes we need a little break. We tend to work through those patterns, right? Where now all of a sudden we think like, well, we want something to interrupt it, so we're going to go to food. But maybe we need a non-calorie bridge. Maybe we just want to have some water, sip of tea. Maybe we just need to kind of get up, stretch. We need to give ourselves those breaks, and they can be non-caloric breaks.
Nice. Okay.
Rather than kind of going to a food to kind of get us to the next moment. It just,
Yeah. Can I say, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I just want to say something super quick because I'm thinking of Steiner in our classroom. We change subjects almost every 20 minutes because their attention span, and they digest so much information that way. Yeah. I was like, hey, this is reminding me of the class. That's the learning center, everybody. Yeah. Like every 20 minutes, we're like math, and then we go to a read, and then we do a little art, and then we do movement, and they're fresh. Mm-hmm.
Amen to that. That is exactly it. This is just how we want to work with the way that our bodies are designed to work.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there to put our head down for 4 straight hours on one thing. And this is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
We want to use our senses. So that can be, smell and taste and visuals, right? We can think of the presentation, right? That's part of the senses. So when we can present something in an appealing way, so we want to present healthy food in an appealing way, right? So we are getting an aesthetic, right? That actually really does matter. And even on, making cute shapes out of food, that all actually works, right? That's an aesthetic. The children have a sense of play and imagination and aesthetics and color. Rainbow Chef's Academy, what? Right? Eat the rainbow. Yeah. So there's that, and learn to taste the food and enjoy the food. And this is why I also talk about processed food, where it is designed in a way to kind of light you up like a Christmas tree, hyper palatability. So just understand this, know what that means.
Yeah.
Because when we get into the conversation of good food, bad food, we can just simply say, well, a Twinkie's bad and broccoli's good. But what I would encourage people to think about is context, because if you were starving and you had zero food, Twinkies can be life-saving medication.
Right? Yeah.
So the point being is that we do need to remember to take away this idea of good or bad, but not lie. Right?
That's a good one.
We're not going to lie. I'm going to tell you that, yes, I'm going to concede the fact that in the situation of food scarcity, or just needing requirements, certain calorie requirements, any food is going to get it done. But let's be honest about the other aspects of these foods. Let's just have like a complete, open and beautiful, nuanced conversation. I think people just may not understand that children can get this stuff. You can work in the idea of nuance with kids. Yeah. And they now they're empowered, right, with that knowledge where they know, well, when I eat this food, I don't have that brake pedal. I talk about the brake pedal with kids. There are certain foods that, imagine if you got in a car and it didn't have a brake pedal and I expected you to stop. Is that fair of me? Is that nice? No, you wouldn't, because the brake pedal's not working. So when you're eating certain foods that don't give you that fullness, you don't have that brake pedal, you can't slow down. I'm not going to look at you. This isn't your fault. I know that that's that kind of food. And I want you to know that that kind of food is lends itself to that. That's what it tends to want to do. But these other foods can make you feel fuller a little easier. So if we can eat these foods first and then, have a little of this here and there, and then see how you're feeling and how, this is an individual process of, okay, how long can you go where you're hungry again? Because I have a lot. It's like my kid's hungry all day long. What is going on? My God, he's hungry all the time. I'm like, well, one, growing bodies. That's part of it too.
Yeah.
Right. So we get into respect your body. And that means a lot of things for a lot of people. Right. That your body needs food, that you're growing, that you're shooting up in height, whatever.
Yeah. And the women and your girls, when they hit their moon cycle, her calories.
All of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
So we have to respect that part of it.
Yeah.
Intentionally choosing food. So my job is to teach you what the foods do, how they work, and then begin to pull up food lists and say, let's see what you like. What are foods from here that you start to like? And they get that process of picking and choosing and shopping and doing virtual shopping, and then taking that and putting meals together from those foods that we already know that they'll eat. And you're building from that place of strength, right? Rather than going, I want to restrict you and put you in a kind of vulnerable position. I know I want to build up where you're already at, and then potentially try to find swaps for some foods that might be, your fast foods or your junk foods, if you will, and go, what is a healthy swap? And that might be a 100% switch, or it might be 50-50 for a while. Half of this, half of that. We might have a sugary cereal that they love, and then maybe we need to mix that with a no sugar cereal so we can cut that sugar in half. Now all of a sudden, okay, I like this, I can do this. And then you slowly move toward that transition. So you want to, you don't want to just drop it out. We want to swap, not drop. We want to replace and not erase. Slowing down, right? Slowing down and savoring. Really enjoying it. Learn to what does food bring to us? It brings us energy. It brings us life force, vitality. And it brings us enjoyment. Let's not forget that. It should be enjoyable. And any way of eating that is not enjoyable and satisfying is not a good way of eating. And we've got to get it to there. That's what we're solving for.
Yeah.
We're not simply solving for, we need Johnny to lose 30 pounds. We're solving for, we need Johnny to understand how to nourish himself, how to eat, what food does, so he can make those decisions for the rest of his life. And he can arrive at a place where he's eating foods that are super enjoyable to him, that keep him satisfied, and then this can maintain. That's it, period. End of story. If it's anything but, it's not working yet. And it's my job to help fix that, because if it's, I'm just kind of struggling with it, but I can do it. Well, we're not trying to cheer on willpower. We're not trying to, let's just push through it. Like, no, we're trying to work with the body. Because that goes into this whole idea of intuition, right? We hear this term intuitive eating.
Yes.
Intuitive eating, well, we need to have our senses clear and aware. And unfortunately, certain foods can interrupt, and kind of play with us where we're like, I'm really, really starving. And we think, well, we're just going to I'm going to honor our health, right? There's this thing of honor your hunger. Yes. But do we really need this much food? Or is it that we ate the 6 Oreos, a half hour ago, we forgot to get protein, we didn't get sleep last night, we're stressed out about school. What else is going on that we need to have join the conversation so that we can tune that? I'm a big believer in intuition, but I also know that intuition can get interrupted. It's like your instrument panel in an aircraft. If it's foggy, and if you didn't have your instruments, you're kind of flying in the fog. How much, even if you're a great pilot with great instincts, you don't have a lot to work with because the signal is being distorted. So you could be an incredibly intuitive human being, but you can be a bit hijacked physically, physiologically by certain food choices or stress management, inability to manage stress, or whatever it might be. So we have to fix all those things up and address those. Those are the big rocks, if you will, to move out of the way before we start getting into like weighing and diet and all of that. So that's we can close up the share.
That was awesome. Yeah.
So I think it's just, if we really think about this thing of hunger, that hunger always wins, that it is the top priority for the human body is to feed itself. And we know what goes into that. That's it. Then when you master the game of hunger, right? You can let it win, because it's always going to win, but it's not going to beat you. It's not going to beat your health. It's not going to dominate and take over to the point where it's going to bring you into disease and, et cetera, et cetera. So
it's helpful. It's giving you a sign of what to pay attention to. You got to pay attention to, what is this hunger pain showing me? And then you do that assessment and you can figure things out a lot quicker. I mean, this is a divine meat suit. If we treat our meat suits, I love calling my little Merkaba body my meat suit, because it's amazing. It's meant to regenerate and heal. And, now they're telling us we're supposed to live till we're 120. It's like, it's your own little science. It's fun. It's like, ooh, I want to make this thrive. Yes. And so it's changing the narrative on food, not necessarily calling out all the evils of the food.
Smash that subscribe button, guys.
It's changed the narrative.
all the meat suits in the house. Let's get together. You're exactly right. Having a curiosity. I think I love working with kids because they have amazing imaginations, and if you can wake up the imagination and the curiosity, and then you can deliver this information in a fun way, in an imaginative way, and get them curious about the bodies they live in. Often it's sad to see people removed from that. That they're not in their body. And they begin to think of exercise as a punishment for not eating right, instead of a celebration of what their body can do. Instead of wow, we can, I can run, I can breathe, I can jump. I mean, kids want to do that. And there are, unfortunately, kids out there that are having issues and struggles with doing those things. But if they're handled in a certain way where they're going to see all these things as some sort of punishment inflicted on them for what they're being told is like poor behavior. Whereas I see it, I go, no, it's natural behavior given what I know. What I know about food and what I know about the body, this is logical behavior from these children. Of course they're going to consume X amount of foods, knowing that the foods that they're being exposed to are diluted in protein, or they weren't aware that they could leverage protein in this way, and their parents weren't aware. We weren't taught this. There's absolutely, like, for me, I just see it as like, well, of course it would surprise me. It would be an unbelievable feat of willpower and restraint for many of these children to not end up in a situation where they've got extra weight and they're trying to deal with it. Like, it would surprise me if that wasn't the case. So I see it as it's perfectly expected. And now that we know these things, now we can make these corrections that, oh, wow, that's a few things that I could do that start to make it better. And I'll kind of finish up with this analogy. If we're in LA, right? And if we were asked to get to New York and we didn't have a map, the first thing we would do is we would just start driving east. And we could do that for a long time. We could do that for 20 hours, and we're generally getting there without a map. However, if it's like, get to the pizza place on the corner of 42nd and, Broadway or whatever it might, I'm making up a street. As we get closer, we need a little more help, right? We need a little bit more of a roadmap. We need a little bit more instruction. So to the point of me giving out all this information is like, people, start driving east. Just start doing some of these things that, even if you didn't have a detailed map, if you just had just general directions, the general direction to head, get at it. And then along the way, if we want to, aim it more, or we'd like more details about how to calibrate it and get it online, then that's where I could come in and say, in your specific case, these things actually might be higher priority than those things. And that's a lot of what I do, is the determination of where do we want to put our energy and time into right now. And often it's the case is it wasn't maybe what they thought it was going to be at first. So these are the fundamentals. This is hunger. I encourage everybody to think more about hunger, what drives it, how to solve for that problem, and get at me if you need help. Lawrence at kidsgethealthy.com, right?
Bravo, Lawrence.
So Heidi, tell me, let's turn it to you real quick. I was flipping it over onto Heidi. We're gonna do more of this. Let's go. So when you mentioned, like, you bring up, your situation in your family and stuff. What is your take on this idea of hunger, and has it been relevant? Has what we talked about today been relevant in your own experience?
Very much so, because again, it's more validity to me harassing the giant. Because he is a beast. He's a big man. And I can see when his glucose, his sugar's dropping, and the choices he makes, but the energy he puts out. He's a generator as well in human design. He needs to sustain his energy. Be careful of these dips and lulls. He's going to get hurt. So to me, it's something. See, Lawrence is even talking about it.
If you want, we could spitball. A quick sample of what would happen in a session. So for the giant, I could give you like a couple quick things to think, right? So Giant's a big guy.
He's a big guy.
Yeah.
He feels like when I'll see him get hangry and he reaches for a huge glass of orange juice. Yeah. Or like he'll honey on a bread. And I'm like, you're going to spike and then you're going to crash.
Yeah. So you got it. You nailed it dead on. Yeah. Another factor with somebody that's just bigger people, there's a hormone called leptin. And leptin is a signaling molecule that speaks to the hypothalamus, and the way it's supposed to work is you'll eat food, the body gets to a point where it says, okay, no mas, it sends leptin to the brain, and you stop eating. Your hunger is satisfied. And when they discovered this, they thought they hit the jackpot. They said, oh, well, now all we have to do now is just give people enough leptin, because some people would have like a leptin deficiency, or they're not making enough, and so they're not feeling full. But what happened was, like most hormones, you get this downregulation where you become resistant to the signal. So they're bombing away with all this leptin, and then all of a sudden now the brain needs more leptin to get that signal. So you become resistant. So what happens often, I would say, with something like the size of the giant, right, is that they may have some form of leptin resistance.
Oh, okay.
So the couple quick take homes, yes, for sure, the prioritization of protein, but you can make a good case for really like 2 or 3 proper meals and really try to avoid any kind of snacking.
Oh, okay.
Because every time you're sort of eating, you're kind of tripping those signals, and we want to kind of, back off on that, right? We want to have that signaling occur less frequently. The other thing could be there might be some underlying inflammation, because we have the leptin coming here, and we have inflammatory signals coming here, and they're both talking to the hypothalamus, where it's just overwhelmed. So if we can bring down the inflammation, now it only has to be concerned with the talk from the leptin, right?
Awesome.
So if sometimes there's too much inflammation going on and you're trying to have leptin, it's completely dysregulated, and you're going to have a problem with appetite and hunger control there. So it's the blood sugar issue, the protein priority issue, and the meal frequency issue.
Frequency, yeah, I didn't even think of that part.
So leptin resistance can certainly be a factor. And then sometimes you'll put people on a program, and then when their leptin gets down too low and they stall, we do little refeeds. So if somebody does, say, like an extended low carbohydrate diet, they start to resensitize everything. Insulin sensitivity restores, leptin sensitivity restores. But then what happens is now it's too low. And then we bump it. We do little refeeds of carbohydrate and these kind of tricks.
Nice.
It's a game of
It's the
homeostasis and
yeah.
balance.
Should I then push for like the low inflammation diet and then a higher
Yeah, you
protein
know, kind of
and just meal? Mm-hmm.
looking at things like omega fatty acids, like making
Mm-hmm.
sure that he's getting enough omega-3.
Okay.
And don't underestimate, a big person needs a high quantity, you know,
I was going to say
probably
that too. Yeah, the
probably
dosing.
2
You
or
got to
3
double it.
grams, you know,
Mm-hmm.
2,000 to 3,000 milligrams of an EPA DHA combo. Things like
Cool.
curcumin, you know,
Cool.
kind of throwing some general things out there, very
Yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah. Well, I just love it because we have a pantry and one whole shelf is like they call it my witchy shelf because it's all like my herbs and all my stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
like, ooh, more chances to buy more vitamins and herbs.
Yeah, those are a
My
couple.
witchy shelf.
Black seed oil is
Oh, yeah, I've heard
great.
of black seed oil. Okay, cool.
You know, so yeah, on
Thank
and on.
you.
There's a whole thing. Walnuts are a nice choice. Good
Okay.
berries, you know, good some nice anti-inflammatory qualities to those foods.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So
Larry.
hunger, you know, it
Woo!
always wins, but we can let it win. We can allow it to win, and we just have to cut down on the margin of victory, right? It's
I'm
always going to
gonna
win,
be
but I'd rather
smart.
it win by 1 point than 20.
Yes.
You know, we don't want it dunking on us all day. We don't want it to blow us out. We graciously allow it to win,
Mhm.
but we want to cut down the margin of victory.
Oh, perfect way to wrap it in a bow. And I'd love to at some point spend some time that very first list you did and all these little causes of
Here we go,
hunger.
more
We have
shows.
we have a way to branch out there. And we also would love to hear from you. If you perhaps want to do a live one time with Lawrence and I, and you can just have your questions right there and get a little dose of what he can do with you and work with you, or we can check out a live episode. But I do encourage you to check out some of our previous ones because every episode I notice you're doing, Lawrence, you totally tie in what we've already previously talked about. So it's all
We're
literally
building on it,
coming
guys.
together.
So
Yeah.
so smashing, here we go. Ready, guys? You're gonna smash the subscribe button. You're gonna like the video. Comment below what you'd love to hear talked about. Check out some past episodes so that you can get up to speed, because it is a building thing, right? We're building
There's
on
recall
previous
in some
shows.
of
There's
these.
lots of things
Yeah.
we keep bringing it back around because repetition is how this works, right? We want to continue to reinforce, but we'd love to hear what you guys would like to know about. And yeah, I'm totally curious. And you know, what did you find value from today? Because that's also really helpful.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, for giving us so much wonderful information and delivered so clearly that even this manic mama can pick it up. So
Manic
hey,
mama in the meat suit. Manic
mom
meat
in
suit
my
mama.
meat suit.
She's
And thank
healthy
you for
Heidi, and she's a manic meat suit mama.
I got realigned this week, so I have a really hard bench. So forgive me for being a little wiggle worm, but I'm all over the place
Love it.
adjusting. And cheers, Lawrence, to episode 10. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. High five. 1, 2, 3. Oh my God.
That
We'll
part
get it
of
down.
the fun, guys, is going to be one day we're going to actually do that right.
1,
look at my
2.
virtual green
Oh
screen.
yeah.
Right. 1, 2, 3.
2, 3.
Oh, yeah, that was not bad.
Episode 20, we're going to get it down. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know your thoughts. Again, you can find Lawrence at kidsgethealthy.com. You can find me, Heidi Pop from Los Angeles. We are both on YouTube. We both have the entire playlist of these on there. We also have a Rumble series of Just Kids Get Healthy. Our Just Kids Health series is all on there. And there it is. And yeah, we look forward to hearing more from you. And thank you so very much for your support. We truly appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Lawrence.
Oh, thank you. This is fun. Episode 10 in the books.
Woohoo!
Later.
Everybody have a beautiful one.